Of all the Springbok players that you did not want to go down, Malcolm Marx is the one. While we are recording, it's unknown the extent of Malcolm's injury, and apparently doctor, client, patient privilege has meant that the Boks coaches aren't telling us the nature of his injury outside of he has gone for a scan. Our understanding is that it is potentially an ACL, a knee injury, and it could rule him out of the World Cup. If he's out of the World Cup, odds are that Andre Pollard replaces him, and as we've been speculating from the outset, the first time someone goes down, Pollard will be on a train, not even on a plane, from Leicester and into France to complete the World Cup. Malcolm Marx, if he is out, he was never in the original 23 for Saturday. If he is out, that is a massive, massive blow to the Springboks. It also changes the dynamic of that bomb squad quite significantly.
Indeed.
Give me the raw!
Indeed it does. So, look, I think...
Give me the raw.
I think that...
Give me the raw.
Hear the roar.
Gracias, amigos.
Give me the raw.
It's Ricky Rodriguez, your favorite.
Tell me about Malcolm.
Rugby expert. Malcolm Marx is a huge loss to this team, to the Springboks. The world champions have lost one of their greatest heroes. The player in the middle of the front row, Malcolm Marx. Will they be able to bounce back? I don't know. We'll have to see. We have to wait until they play Ireland to really get the picture of what this means for the team. But I think they could do it. I'm positive.
All right, Ricky Rodriguez. You asked for him. I thought I'd get him in early. Malcolm Marx, if he's out, we know for the Romania game, they've gone with Dion Fourie as the backup hooker. They've also said Marco van Staden can cover hooker. I also hear that he played scrum off when he was at school, so he can cover scrum off as well. Bongi and Malcolm as a combo, probably unrivaled in world rugby, and they have been for the last kind of 4 years, how they worked in tandem. But just, Eben's injured. They said he'll be back for Ireland with a shoulder. One never knows just how serious that is. No Lukanya Pollard, we believe, is on the way back. They've always said he's on standby and he's ready to go. But that is a big blow. If you're going into an Ireland game potentially without Eben and potentially without Malcolm Marx, it just does change the dynamic slightly.
I think it changes it significantly, and I think it's, it kind of feels like the World Cup may be on again now, because with those two guys in the mix, we've been speaking about it, the Boks are pretty much unstoppable in the sense that nobody can man up to them. But you take out Eben Etzebeth and you take out Malcolm Marx, it's not so much about who replaces those guys in the starting lineup, it's about who replaces those guys in the squad. And so we've spoken about the potential goal-kicking issues in this team without Andre Pollard, and now we're going to have to be talking about the potential line-out issues without Malcolm Marx. I've got no doubt that Bongi is, can do a great job and is arguably the guy that should be starting and is great at the line-out as well. But Dion Fourie, everybody's favorite, whatever he is, 37-year-old, is not a great line-out thrower. Or at least he wasn't during any of the years that I watched him play hooker at the Stormers. So, and when you've got Marco van Staden warming up as your number 3, you're starting to have a bit of a giggle here, mate. I mean, come on. What are we doing? I mean, what's next? Steven Kitsoff at Flowerf. It's getting a bit...
Joe Dwebi in the 12, the new Bastaroo.
Yeah, your dream come true.
Yeah, I'd love to see Joe Dwebi put a 1 in front of that 2 and play where he belongs, number 12.
It certainly takes a sting out of the bomb squad, which is the point that you made.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the social media go abuzz last night with Malcolm Marx has sustained an injury, just the clandestine way it was reported, the lack of transparency, and just to say he's taken a blow to his knee or he's taken a blow to his neck.
Yeah, sounds like knee ligaments.
It sounds like knee ligaments. It doesn't sound good. And all the kind of messages we're getting from people in the industry, people who are connected to the squad as well, say that there is serious concern and that he could be out. They're also saying that Pollard is the one that's going to replace him, and not Joe Dwebi as a specialist hooker. Who knows? We'll see. The pressure may be on them to bring Joe Dwebi in, but I think they've been chomping at the bit to get Pollard there just as a potential insurance cover, and that's not detracting from Marnie at all. It may be then come an island game or come a playoff game, you see Pollard slotting on the bench as opposed to starting place of Manie Lebok. Let's just switch our attention to the Romanian game. Really, if they played the Tux 15, maybe not the Tux 15, but anyone else, they'd beat Romania on Sunday. So in the context of the result and the points differential, it's a nothing game. Given the conditions, given the kind of makeup of the Boks side, you're probably looking at a 60-plus points differential in that game. Ireland picked their best team, won 83-8. If we picked our best team, we'd be over 100 points. This team hasn't played together. There's a lot of players kind of... you've got Grant Williams playing on the wing. He should gobble up a few tries. You've got Faf de Tooy that's covering for fly-off.
Faf de Klerk.
Faf de Klerk, Faf de Tooy, Jesus. Faf,
You could ever make that mistake.
Faf de Tooy. I'm bringing him Grappy de Tooy. I'm bringing him back. At least it's not Faf du Plessis. But you've got Faf covering at fly-off. You've got Marco van Staden covering as another hooker.
Yeah.
Dion Ferry, who's played flank since he's come back. He's covering as the second choice hooker. But you still look at that 23. I'd back that 23 to go out and beat the All Blacks at the moment. It's still a very good 23 when you look at the individuals that make up the collective. A 4-3 split, so there's no shenanigans there for this one. And with no disrespect to Romania. I mean, Romania pre-professionalism were a decent side when it was all kind of like state-run.
Yeah.
They ran a lot of teams close. 1995, 20 points to 8. Adrian Richter captained the side, 2 tries at Newlands. I was there for that unfortunate game. It was a shocker after we had beaten Australia in the 95 World Cup opener. It's not going to be as close this time. We are going to roll them. What are the significant things you want to take from this game, and what is there to take from this game?
Well, the only thing to take from this game is a clean bill of health. Guys need to come through the match, obviously win it and be healthy. You know, we are now dangerously close to a situation where we have got a serious problem with injuries. So, especially the heavies, we need to make sure that everybody comes through no problems. Hopefully that's the case. But I mean, you know, you spoke about it, the hardest game for the Boks at the World Cup being their corpus time sessions. And the sort of collateral damage there has been Malcolm Marx. So we just need to get through this match, bank the points, and no injuries.
Yeah, and if you look at the makeup, your man Damien, he's at 10. Villy's at 15. They give him Manie Lebok. We said give him a break. They gave him a break.
Yes, they
They've given Sia a break. I'm happy about that because you just don't need a guy like Sia Khaleesi going down in an innocuous match against Romania.
Yes. We've got 2 of our 3 hookers. We've got all 3 of our hookers in this match. What? Do we?
Yes. And all 4 scrum halves.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. I mean, look, it's Romania. It's really like a mild contact session that they're going to be going through. And people need to understand that the one thing about this World Cup, there's 1 or 2 big pool matches. We saw our one against Scotland was big. Australia against Fiji on Sunday is probably the game of the weekend, and that says it all. When that is the biggest game. New Zealand picking 20 of their best 23 players to play in Namibia on Friday night just tells you the state that they're in at the moment.
Yeah.
But then they have 2 weeks off before they play Italy. And that's one of the critiques of this World Cup structure is great buzz in the first round.
Yeah.
And then nothing for the next 2 weeks, basically, because the minnows are playing each other. Some teams aren't playing for a fortnight. Kind of just loses a bit of its appeal outside of France.
Often we go to a World Cup and it feels like there are 5 or 6 heavyweights. You know, there's massive doubts around Australia. All Blacks, big question marks at the moment. France look powerful. Ireland haven't really played yet, so can't talk a lot about them. Wales are nowhere. The sort of top billing is missing from this World Cup because there's a lot of average. And so, like, when you add the minnows into the mix on top of that, it really creates a long stretch of games that are...
When you've got a Wales second team playing Portugal.
I mean, Wales are a second team, so it's their third team.
Third team playing Portugal. And it's like, it'll be fun to watch. It'll be like watching sevens.
Yeah.
This weekend for me is a bit like watching sevens on the opening day of a 3-day event, maybe even on day 2.
Yeah.
Those pool stages where you don't really care, you know the top 8 are going to go through, and day 3 is where you go for the fun. It's just, you know, people are making a noise about the choirs, the kids have now been bulleted, they can't sing the national anthems, the crowd can't keep up. To me, it's just the way they've tried to incorporate 20 teams into a World Cup, and there's not 20 teams that are worthy of playing in a World Cup.
Correct.
What they should have done is basically have a Tier 1, Tier 2 system playing at the World Cup. Your thoughts on that, Ricky?
Well, I mean, my thoughts on that are probably not very mainstream, but I feel like World Rugby's been spending a lot of money on stuff other than their main product, and perhaps if they'd spent that money on the second-tier nations instead of other things, we wouldn't be in this situation at the World Cup with basically 3 teams that can play.
All right, so we got Australia against Fiji. That's going to wrap up the weekend. You always felt that Fiji had to get that win against Wales to kind of give them the bump. There's quite a few blokes in the Australian side with Fijian heritage, ancestry. So, I've got Australia to win that game fairly comfortably as well. I just think they'll be too clever for a Fijian side that is wonderful to watch and plays off the cuff. And I repeat it, but they don't play the brightest rugby. And I'm not saying that the players are stupid. I'm talking about rugby intellect. If they had shown some rugby nous and rugby intellect in the last 20 minutes of that game, they would have pumped Wales.
And it's certainly not isolated to Fiji. This is a common thing in rugby.
The All Blacks played stupid rugby. Argentina were probably the most stupid of all the teams.
Absolutely.
To be having that one-man advantage for 77 minutes. So I know a few people were a bit put out and said we've attacked the Fijians for calling them stupid. Well, they were rugby stupid. And if they weren't rugby stupid, they would have had the win. Equally, would have been the case with Argentina. And New Zealand, not the brightest, but they haven't been the brightest for a while when it comes to the way they play the game. And I'm going to get to them just now. Read an interesting article from out of New Zealand, saying the whole world has understood what World Cups is about, except New Zealand. When they did understand it, 2011 and 2015, they won it, which was about a strong pack, direct rugby, play the percentages, and play low risk. If you look at that 2011 campaign and the 2015 campaign, where you had a very good New Zealand pack and you had Dan Carter pulling the strings at 10, when they had it on the counter, when it was on, they went for it. Go back to that South African semi-final, 11-7 down, one man down, in the rain at Twickenham. Were they trying to take that ball through 19 phases? No. Dan Carter whacked over a great 40-metre angle drop goal. Then he kicked a great penalty. The World Cup final against Australia. Yellow card to Ben Smith. Australia start coming back. It becomes a one-score game. Dan Carter again, drop goal and a penalty from nearly halfway. Then they went to 2019 with this absurd notion that they were going to take the game to another level. That thing that comes out of New Zealand, we're going to play a game that the world's never seen before. A bit like the aliens from the Mexico have released to the world now. And they were picking props who could play when. They were picking flanks who should be playing in the midfield. Everyone could offload, they just couldn't scrum. They forgot the basics and they got pumped in that semi-final against England. One of the most embarrassing All Black performances I've ever seen. I thought that one was even more embarrassing than the 35-7 defeat at Twickenham. Yeah. They were never in that semi-final. Yeah. And you would think in those 4 years they would have gone back and actually said, let's go back to finding, we've got 4 years to find a pack. We need some grunt and we need some mongrel in that pack, and we need to understand that 10 is Mohanga and he plays like he does at the Crusaders. He doesn't play, because at the moment they're a mixture between the Hurricanes, the Blues and the Crusaders, and chucking a bit of Chiefs. Yeah. In the way they play, it's a very confused identity. So they're going to go against Namibia. They're going to run them ragged. They won 71-9 in 2019. They won 58-14 in 2015 against Namibia. They're already talking about what an aggressive physical approach they're going to have against Namibia. This is a Namibian side that gets pumped by South African club sides. This is a Namibian side that took 50 against Italy, and the All Blacks are talking them up.
I think the All Blacks are talking them up because they want to talk about what's coming, because they don't want to talk what just happened. So talking about the news kind of detracts, from the last thing that they did. But that thing that you're talking about, forgetting the basics, isn't that the classic rugby cycle that every single team goes through? You go through a period where your team sucks and everybody's like, I don't care how you do it, just score one more point than the opposition. We have to get back to winning ways, whatever it takes. Then they go back, they play clever rugby. They kick the ball, they defend, they score from turnovers. People are like, yes! This is the best this team is. We are the greatest. Nobody can stop us. And then 6 months later, it's like, yeah, look, we're winning, but why can't we win with style? And before you know it, you're back at the place where you can't win games.
Geez, watching that first weekend again, and I had a huge chuckle, and especially reading the New Zealand reports. They want to play with style. They want to win with style. That crap you heard for 24 years when they didn't win a World Cup. When they said they would rather lose a World Cup scoring tries than win it with a drop goal.
Yeah.
Well, they certainly were awestruck by Stephen Donald coming on and kicking a penalty in that 8-7 win in 2011, and no one was saying anything about Dan Carter's drop goals in the semi-final and the final against South Africa and Australia respectively.
Yeah.
That's understanding the nuance of the game. The crazy stat that I read is that George Ford in 10 minutes kicked 3 drop goals against Argentina. That's more than New Zealand has kicked in 8 years. Now, yes, we know they can strike from anywhere and they can get 12 points or 14 points depending on the kicker. So that's 2 tries. But then they're gone for the rest of the game. So they're talking about speeding up the game, a spectator appeal. Let's get the ball in play for 40 minutes, 38 minutes. It only was in play for 27 minutes against France. France kicked the ball 60 times. Exactly. Do you know what? France kicked the ball 60 times because you were stupid enough to try and run it back from everywhere.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. You talk about how much rugby they played, and that comes directly out of what they got away with in Super Rugby when South African teams weren't there. It was basically just touch rugby on steroids with the Australian teams. And the Blues just went full basketball mode. Tackling was optional. We watched it for a couple of seasons, and this is, I'm not saying this is the major contributing factor to where New Zealand rugby is now, but it certainly did contribute to where they are now.
Well, that physicality, and I'm talking about consistent physicality, has just gone out of their game.
Also, when you play in a basketball environment, right, a guy like Ethan Blackadder is almost like passé. It's almost like, oh, you saw last Tuesday, you know, like why you want to be physical? Just let's play some ball. And they lost respect for those guys because they didn't need the brunt force to knock over Australian teams who are just basically ice cream at the moment. So that kind of player was overlooked. And I think that's why a guy like Ethan, along with his injuries, was almost an afterthought for this All Black squad. They haven't put a premium on physicality. And it's not something you can just turn around with one selection in a week.
But if you just look at the concept of rugby, what apparently the spectators want, it's more what New Zealanders want.
Big time.
They want Bledisloe Cup every time they play.
Big time.
Harlem Globetrotters, wonderful on the eye. But the essence of rugby has never changed. And you go back to the great teams, even in professional rugby, the teams that won the World Cups, they all had one thing in common. They had a very good pack and they had a very good 10 or very good halfbacks.
Yeah.
You go 87, 91, 95, 99, 2003, 2007, 11, 15, and 19.
It's a physical game.
There's one common denominator. None of those teams won the World Cup by scoring 6 tries to 1, scoring 44-25 games. They won it because their pack did the graft, did the hard work. They knew how to play field percentages. And then the very, very good ones could blitz you with turnover ball, as we saw with the All Blacks in the 2015 final against Australia. They turn over the ball, they could score. We saw the Boks against England in that 32-12 final when they played with width, they exposing them. But it all started with 6 penalties against the England pack in the first 25 minutes where we shunted them all over the park. So to say that France are the new evil of world rugby when I read it, you know, they kick so much and they don't play the old French way. The old French way won them nothing.
Exactly.
It won them beautiful praise from people who loved supporting a loser.
Correct.
So Fabian Galtey, who was one of their most successful captains, came in as the coach and he changed the psyche of French is being victorious. French is about rebellion. French is about revolt. And he's really found an identity and a DNA for this team. And Sean Edwards has come in and given them discipline defensively. And their mindset is they've got a winning mindset, but they've got a very strong pack. They've got a 9 who absolutely understands the nuances of the game and can control it. He knows when to take the ball to his backs and he knows when to stick it 40 meters down and say to the opposition, what are you going to do with it? And that's where they would struggle with a team like South Africa. It would be a bit like when Wales played South Africa in the semi-final in 2019.
Glorious.
Who's going to actually play?
Yeah, who's going to take the bait first?
Not you, and we'll see whose kicking game is better. But rugby is not rugby league. It's not basketball. It's not any other type of sport. Rugby is a sport. One, it's a contact sport, and we're going to get to that. But kicking is fundamental to the sport. How your line kicking, your goal kicking, and your tactical kicking is what makes great teams.
Correct. Mate, you hit the nail on the head there, because a huge problem with rugby is that the people that make the decisions about the game, They may have played the game for many, many years. They may have been involved in the game for many, many years. But rugby is unique in that it's a sport where a lot of the people that run the modern game don't understand the mechanics of this modern sport. Like, you watch the old clips. I was watching David Campisi this morning just run through Oak, score great tries. It's fabulous stuff. But if that guy had to play today, he would be tackled almost every time he touched the ball, number one. And number two, if the Oaks from today played then, they would carve those guys up because there was no defense. So rugby today is led by guys who take a lot of advice from consultants that have got nothing to do with rugby. And marketing people have sold rugby on the idea that tries and sidesteps and offloads is the game's number one commodity. And there is truth to that, right? People do want to see that stuff. But for excitement factor on skills, rugby is never going to be able to compete with the obvious athleticism and skill of a sport, a simplistic skill and athleticism of sports like soccer, basketball, American football. There are lots of sports that require you to be less of a connoisseur to understand the skill. And so what makes rugby unique is that you have to pass the ball. You can't pass the ball forward, okay? Or at least you couldn't. You can't pass the ball forward, and it's a physical sport. You go there to see big men run into each other at high speed and then produce skill in that context. The skill on its own cannot rival gymnastics. Okay, you have to have an appreciation for the fact that 120 kilogram guy offloaded the ball after being crushed in a tackle by two guys his size. That's where the appreciation comes. So the physicality is paramount.
So your successful teams and England, that side that won the 2003 World Cup, Clive Woodward's team, that had such success in the 4 years building up to that, very good All Black sides, the Boks side of 95, 2007, even the one that went to the 2011 World Cup, and obviously 19 in this one, same squad of players, and then this French side that's played for the last 3-4 years, and then the Irish side that's dominated world rugby for 3-4 years.
Yeah,
they've done it because of the intelligence that they play with, the fact that they have a really imposing set of forwards, and they have a particularly good 10 and 9, or worst case scenario, a particularly good 10, that understands it's a joy to kick the ball. It's always been a joy to kick the ball. And why, if I'm playing against a Harlem Globetrotters side like New Zealand, why would I want the ball in play for 40 minutes with my big forwards charging around in 30 degrees heat? I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to kick it into the corners. I'm going to want 27 minutes of ball in play. And the fact that they haven't been able to adapt to that and kick it back and conserve their energy and start making the miracle play and the magic offload 20 meters from their try line while their forwards are getting smashed, just comes down to plain stupidity or plain arrogance that their way is the best way. And on occasion it may work, like that 20 minutes against the Springboks at Mount Smart, where they blitzed a Boks team that was very cold, that hadn't played for a while. But even the context of that game, we brought it back to 23-17, and with a bit of luck could have potentially snuck it in the end after they had such dominance for 20-25 minutes. And the way they play, you can't sustain that game even if your forwards get parity for 80 minutes at that tempo, and especially in these conditions in France. So I don't think New Zealand can adjust.
Well, it comes down to the strength of the coaching. That's why Jason Ryan made such a difference there, because he's a strong-minded, strong-willed guy. And you get the impression from what you read and see about him that he's not there to make friends with the players. Weaker coaches need to make friends with the players. They need the players to own the team and drive everything. And what happens there is that the players do what feels good. And what feels good is catching and passing, not kicking and chasing.
Well, if I go back to the Crusaders under Todd Blackadder, they won nothing for 5-6 years. They got into every playoff game. They were playing such a lateral rugby. It was side to side. They were taking it through multiple phases. They play the side like the Bulls. They go 18, 20 phases, one big hit, kick through, try to the Bulls, conversion, 7 points down. And Scott Robinson came in and actually understood how he wanted to play rugby. And they never lost. Now, you've got these Crusaders players who play for the All Blacks. They look totally different players.
Totally.
And so I'm sure the All Blacks will be a lot better next year when Scott Robinson comes in, Jason Ryan is there. And they will go back to what works for them. We may see that kind of New Zealand 2011, 2015 type mentality.
Yes.
For now, I think they're gone in terms of how they want to play. Even if they somehow pox the quarterfinal win against whoever, I can't see them putting together 3 big ones in a row, not with the limitations in their squad. But I do think it's that arrogance, and maybe it is. They were in COVID isolation for 2 years. The world forgot about them. They forgot about the world, and they believe their own press. Super Rugby's this great thing. It's 45. We watched some of those games, 75,
Terrible.
61.
Unwatchable.
54, 43. It was just, the props were there to kind of offload. The scrum was a restart. It was like rugby league.
Yeah.
And just when you thought they were starting to get a little bit of mongrel back at the Ellis Park test when they played with desperation, they revert to type again. You know, so yeah, it just amazes me how very good rugby teams are condemned for playing very good rugby. France has been condemned now. South Africa has been condemned. It's like these guys are new age. They are so new age in the way they play. You know, I think New Zealand thought that they could seduce France into reverting to type for the appeal of 80,000.
That's a good call, that.
But can I tell you now, those 80,000, and most of them were French, or the neutrals were back in France, had no issue that every second ball went up into the heavens at the start.
Correct.
And saw New Zealand fumble it or try and run it back.
Correct.
What they wanted was that end result. And when France got the opportunity, when they had numbers and they had the mismatches, they scored a great try to kind of seal it.
Yeah.
So I think for our supporters as well, and I see it on social media, we give the Boks a hard time. Come on, let's play more expansive. Let's play with width and that. You know, I keep on going back to what Eddie Jones, I've said it in nearly every show, said to the Springboks, if the Brumbies had the Springbok pack in Fareed Dupree, you'd never know who played 10 for them.
Correct.
So let's appreciate what we have. We have a particularly good rugby team. France has a particularly good rugby team, and Ireland has developed a particularly good rugby team because they understand when to kick and when to pass. New Zealand, Australia, easy on the eye, Bledisloe Cup. That's kind of exhibition rugby you want to take to America and convince them that that's what you want to see. However, the Americans want to see guys flying into each other, gridiron style. And if you go back into the history of the World Cup, one of the greatest games that I ever saw, potentially the greatest game, was South Africa against Australia, 99 semi-final. It was 18-15
Beautiful.
in terrible conditions. Yanni de Beer kicked a 50 on the angle, 50 meter into the wind penalty, 18-all. We went into extra time. Yanni de Beer took us 21-18. The Stephen Larkham 21, Matt Burke 21-all. Then the Larkham drop goal 24-23. And people forget Berkey added another one at the end, 27-21. There was no try scored there. There was this incredible break by Robbie Fleck, a wonderful tackle by George Gregan. There was Timmy Horan's break, wonderful tackle by Joos van der Westhuizen. It was edge. It was like edge of the seat stuff. It was just a glorious game, and there wasn't a 5-pointer.
For everybody watching at home, that oak just recalled all of that just off the top of his head.
Well, I was there. You can hardly forget it.
He didn't research any of that stuff. 1999 was 24 years ago.
And then the next day, when I watched New Zealand 24-10 up at halftime, to Jonah, big tries, and then the French went mad in the second half and destroyed them, okay? And Jeff Wilson came back and scored a late try to kind of put it together. But everyone raves about that French game. But that French game, especially in the second half, was more like a kind of one team just had a meltdown. But that first one was the semi-final because they went a week later to the final in Cardiff, and Australia won 35-12. Owen Finnegan scored that great try from 30 metres.
Finnegan. We should do a whole show just on him.
And he was, again, one of the unheralded Australians, a tough bastard. And he just went with about 5 French guys on his back, and he just went all the way through. It was one of the most one-sided, lopsided World Cup finals because the final had been played the week before that with the Springboks and Australia. Now, that's why I keep on saying I want to see a France-South Africa final because that is a rugby final.
Yes.
God forbid if Australia and New Zealand meet somewhere, it's going to be beautiful on the eye, but not much else.
Yes, agreed. I agree with that 100%. And I think that Australia-Fiji game we spoke about is going to be a great showcase of exactly that tactical philosophy that you mentioned in the show now. Is, do Australia have the brains to actually just not get caught up in the circus, put the ball in the corners with Flash Gordon and see what happens? If they take the bait, Fiji has the potential to carve them up and stun them at the World Cup. So,
again, I looked at all the reaction from the weekend's games. Obviously, Fiji's the everyone loves Fiji, okay? It's the people's team. And they were so hard done by with the inconsistencies of the referee. Whether it's inherent bias, I don't know. Warning the Welsh team 5 times, nothing. One misdemeanor from the Fijian side, yellow card. And just again, consistently, he treated the Fijians with such disrespect that whether you like Fijian rugby and the way they play or not, you were going to support them in that match.
Yes.
But all the statistics that have come out, all the rave reviews, and my response is they lost. And you don't win World Cups by meters gained or offloads made or passes made.
Fiji were great for everybody that doesn't support Fiji. That's just a casual weekend warrior flipping through channels, caught 20 minutes of the game, was like, wow, that's amazing. I really enjoy that. Go ask Fiji fans whether they would have preferred to kick more if it meant they could have won.
And they would have taken the
They would have taken the points.
And it's that mentality, if you're going to be taken serious at these competitions.
Yeah.
You go there, play with rugby intellect. A functional rugby intellect, as Eddie always says, and emotional intelligence, and kind of get the win. And I think that's going to be the difference between Australia and Fiji this weekend. I think you will see a little bit more rugby intellect from Australia than you will from Fiji, but they're going to score a couple of great tries.
Definitely.
And everyone's going to say, oh, they were so close again. So this weekend is basically a weekend that's made for fantasy rugby. All of you who are playing World Rugby Fantasy League, pick a lot. You can only pick 3 per team, but pick 3 All Blacks, pick 3 Welsh guys, pick a couple of French guys for the game that they're gonna win comfortably as well. It really doesn't mean much. The main thing with the Boks, we don't get any injuries. We kind of take the pressure cooker off us in terms of go out there and have some fun. Show your attacking prowess. Damien Williamson gets some game time at 10. Willie gets a bit of confidence back. For me, this is really a confidence hit-out. And Jean Klein get through 75, 80 minutes, because if Eben doesn't play, I do see Jean Klein going into that position with Ergier Snyman on the bench.
Definitely. I mean, what else do they do? It's got to be JK and Ergier.
And JK against his old team, Ireland, that's assuming Eben doesn't come back. They still say he may, but we're looking at a worst-case scenario here. Finally, Zels, before we wrap up, a thing that really irks you and it irks me is this head collision stuff. Accidental hit to the head, red cards, suspensions, yet every second time we see a loose forward, a prop, a lock, a hooker, pick up the ball and drive it 5 meters from the try line. He's invariably making head contact with the opposition guy, and nothing gets said about that. Should we not come back to, it's clear if there's malicious intent or a very poor tackle technique that could have been avoided, then bin the guy. But at high speed, when there's a slight variation in movement and 2 heads clash, the pain of the collision should be punishment enough. And the only difference is, in that same scenario, if the other bloke is not carrying the ball, he goes. It's just crazy at the moment, the way it's been officiated, all in the name of player safety, yet they're allowed 8 on 7 in a scrum. They allow 8 on 7 in a scrum, even 8 on 6 in a scrum. As long as there's 2 props and a hooker on the field. How's that not knocking at player safety and player welfare? And every time a front row goes down 900 kilograms of pack, tell me that's not worse than an accidental head clash. What was the New Zealand prop? Williams?
Yeah, Tamaiti.
He said in his debut against the Springboks at Mount Smart, he was not called at the first engagement. Let's then just kick out the scrums from World Rugby and make it Rugby League. It's just absurd. Curry should never have been sent off. Jesse Krill was rightly not kind of cited. And the poor Chilean oak should never have been sent off when who did they play? Chile. Who did they play in that
Who did
game?
Chile play? Chile lost to
42-12 they lost. I know the score, but
had
who
to
did
make
they play?
them work.
Japan. So they played when the Japanese fullback kind of stumbled into him with his back and then turned in a head collision and he was sent off. So it's kind of, let's get our priorities right. Let's understand that rugby's a game where you're allowed to kick and there's value in kicking for the corners and there's value in kicking for poles. That's why it's 3 points, okay, not 1 point. And when there's malicious intent and thuggery, bin the guy, suspend him, ban him. But it is a contact sport and there's going to be accidental clashes, but then be consistent, because your head going into my head 2 meters from the try line when we're basically at knee level is far worse than an accidental head clash in the midfield.
Mate, we could do 10 episodes on this, but to keep it short and sweet, for me, this whole under the guise of player safety, it's a giant con, and nobody is against measures to protect players. At no point in the history of rugby has rugby said it's 100% safe. When you sign up to play rugby, it doesn't say in the rules, "Hello, Johnny, welcome to rugby. You can never get hurt." People get hurt. The rate of concussions in cheerleading, in collegiate cheerleading in America is ridiculous. Okay, so people get hurt in real life. People die. They choke on their toothbrushes every year. It happens. Okay, so everybody is for player safety, but rugby needs to continue being rugby, because the only way to make it safe is to stop it from being rugby. And so things like the HIA, I think, is a fantastic initiative. Too many times I've watched in a match many years ago when a guy was clearly concussed and he just carried on playing on, wandering around in the field, and nobody did anything. So I think HIA, fantastic initiative. They've eradicated massively risky things like the neck roll, crocodile roll. Those things have been pulled out of rugby. They've made rugby far safer. But we are now at a point where this is about something more than just player safety. And these collisions, you talk about intent, okay? They've muddied the water there where you're not actually sure, is it about every time there's a head clash, there must be some sort of sanction, or are we talking about intent? And clearly it's not about intent, because there are oftentimes, as was the case with Curry, as was the case with Jesse Creel, multiple head clashes where it's obvious there's no intent, it's a rugby incident, and yet it goes to the TMO, the guy gets sanctioned, sometimes there's a citing, okay, because the safety. Now, the reality is you can never take that out of the game without taking collisions out of the game. And that is what rugby is about. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of incidents in a match where somebody's head makes contact with somebody else inadvertently and nothing happens, because the con would fall to pieces if they actually had to officiate those instances. In the last match with South Africa and Scotland, there's a moment in that match where I think it's the Scotland scrum half has tried to tackle a guy, the ball carrier's gone past him, he's on the ground, the player gets tackled, and as he's getting up, I think Sos is coming past him and his boot clips him in the head as he runs to the ruck. Okay, you didn't even see a replay of it. The point I'm trying to make is if any head contact is deadly, as these guys are trying to sell us, why are we only officiating a few instances in a match? We have to officiate everything then. And I think what I'm hearing behind the scenes is referees and coaches have had enough. And I think that match with the All Blacks, where there were 7 cards, I think, in that match. Was that the right one? Was it the All Blacks? There were 7 cards, I think 6 yellows and a red or something ridiculous. That's a referee trying to send out that's his code word, you know? That's him trying to send a message to the world, like, hey, if we actually have to apply these ridiculous rules that we're getting from HQ, this game will disappear tomorrow. And people need to understand, yes, you may get hurt playing rugby, and there are instances where it's tragic, where a person's life has changed and it's terrible, but that's real life. And that happens in almost every industry. Nobody has to play rugby. If you don't want to get hurt playing rugby, don't play rugby. But for many of these guys, rugby changes people's lives for the better by the hundreds of thousands across the planet. And when you've got however many 100,000 registered male players in England alone, and the safety crisis can only scratch together a rabble of 300 people, some of them not even from rugby, cross-code stuff, you've got to wonder just how legitimate these claims are.
Well, I think you keep on going back to it is a contact sport. These are professional players. They choose to play the game. They know they're going into combat. And the big word there is intent.
Spot on.
And if the only interpretation that the match officials have to make is there an intent in this collision? Our belief, yes, there is. Then you back that match official because they were on the field and they saw it. But if there's no intent, it's play on. And we will play on this weekend. It's the Boks against Romania, Sunday. a nice time in the afternoon. Enjoy it for what it is. It's one of those games. You know the Boks are going to win. They're going to win comfortably. The big thing, as Zels said earlier, no injuries. Jean Klein has a good hit out. Damien gets some game time at 10. And Grant Williams gets to show his versatility at 14. You may even find Damien goes to 15 for the last 20 minutes. Faf comes on at 10 as well, and they give him a run at 10. And make no mistake, Dion Fourie will get a good run in the second half at hooker.
Brace yourselves, because on Monday we're going to be hearing how Andre Esterhuizen is the best centre ever to play for South Africa. That bloke is going to score 6 tries on the weekend.
I don't know if he'll score 6 tries. I'd like to think he'd offload the ball and Grant Williams will score 6 tries.
No one's stopping him.
Huh? And then the one that does have some intrigue for us, obviously, Ireland up against Tonga. Tonga will offer a little bit more than Romania. They don't have the pack to stay with Ireland. Again, a bit like Fiji, they'll offer some moments in the backs with their retreaded All Blacks that are playing there. Ireland to win that one comfortably in double digits. For us, who knows? Maybe Tonga do to Johnny Sexton what World Rugby couldn't and put him out the game for a couple of months.
Did I call him Grant Esterhuizen? I always do that. Or did I say Andre?
You said Andre the Giant, Andre Esterhuizen.
Okay.
So Johnny Sexton, Ireland will be hoping he gets through this game and that they also get through this game with minimal injuries.
Come on, Tonga!
Come on, Tonga!
Do us a few favours!
Thanks, guys. We'll chat to you, if not tomorrow, then obviously on Monday.